Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real Texas parents about what's going on in our schools. Today, I am joined by a mom of three and a former Texas teacher, Julie Williams. Julie, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Mandy. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so excited that you're here to say the quiet parts out loud. And boy, are there a lot of things for us to talk about. So let's start. You are a former Texas public school teacher, correct?
Correct.
Share with me a little bit about your positive experience in the suburb of Austin,
Yeah.
the ISD that you were teaching at. What were some of the great things that you experienced?
Yeah. So I've been a lifelong teacher, but during the pandemic, I found that I needed to homeschool my children.
Mhm.
And from homeschooling, I realized, wow, this is really complex. There's a lot of parts and pieces to teaching children that need to be recognized. And so when we chose to go back to public school, um, I started substitute teaching to be a part of the school system and be in the classroom to see how I can not only support teachers, but families that I know have been struggling during those difficult times.
Mhm.
And so I started substituting and I taught literally everything from pre-K all the way through fifth and just really enjoyed interacting with the students, interacting with the families, learning a ton about really what goes into the art of teaching,
Mm.
especially in a real live large classroom.
Yeah.
And so I got a lot of joy out of seeing individual students be able to grow and being able to help those families that just didn't have the same support that I was blessed to have during a pandemic situation and being able to homeschool my own children.
Yeah.
So, a lot of great community involvement and a sense of self accomplishment and success and seeing how I could have an impact, a positive impact on other families.
So your substitute teaching was a great experience, which led you
Yes,
to become a full-time teacher.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And how was that?
So I had a great year. I
Mhm.
taught fifth grade, which was a fun age group to teach because it's transitional
Mhm.
and they're able to comprehend and process and they're just it's a great level to teach. And so I really had a great year up and towards the end. Um as a first year teacher, it was a big learning curve. Um but there was a lot of hiccups,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of room for growth. And I was blessed that I was with a team of 3 teachers,
Mhm.
and I was lucky that one of them had many years of teaching, that was very supportive and understanding and I could learn from.
Yeah.
Um, but all 3 of us struggled. We struggled a lot with, we had 67 students between the 3 of us,
Mhm.
and amongst that group of children, there was a lot of behavioral issues. So classroom management was a big challenge for all
Mm.
3 of us. Unfortunately, it got to the point, um, that just after the holiday breaks, one of the teachers chose to leave. And so we went from 3 to 2, and that required administration to pull other supportive teachers from their areas of responsibility and have to focus on our class.
So can you give us some actual examples when you talk about some behavior problems? Can you
Yeah.
talk about what was really going on? What did you all experience by the students and by the administration? What are some things that occurred?
Boundaries, healthy boundaries were really a challenge. When you're blessed enough to have a teaching opportunity, you really take great care in recognizing that you're working with other families' children.
Mhm.
And so you have a fine line of what is character building or moral in a classroom, because really our job there is to give them as much support to be able to build their character and have good judgment, critical thinking, social emotional learning.
Mhm.
It's a huge part of a classroom environment because you are learning and teaching as a small community in the classroom. And the biggest challenge we had is the understanding of what boundaries need to be implemented for learning and for teaching to take place in a community like a classroom.
So just not talking or not getting up.
Exactly. Just being able to be clear with what expectations are,
Mhm.
being willing to listen to others, not overspeak each other. But it went further than that. It was beyond just the typical child boundary pushing, healthy, what can I get away with type stuff. We unfortunately had to manage with a lot of racist issues,
Okay.
a lot of foul language,
Mhm.
the importance of understanding um, that no means no, and that bullying is really not okay.
Yeah.
So it was a mix of different conflicts.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. Let's
Mhm.
go first to the bullying. When a child was being bullied, then what happened?
So we found that there was a group of um, boys that would like to gang up and really be physically violent, honestly, with other students. And so we were dealing with having to literally separate on a regular basis. And
And what's the consequence for that?
well, that was the big one, was that's the fine line of consequences need to be established with communication with parents.
Mhm.
It's not just the teacher's role, it's multiple teachers that are working with these same children. It's the administration that's working with the children, it's families. So it takes a lot of collaborating and cooperation
Uh-huh.
between teacher, parent, student, administration. And unfortunately, my experience was lacking in a lot of that. Um,
So when there was a physical altercation, if that was lacking, as you say, then what would happen to the students that were physically violent and harming other kids? Because I hear from moms and dads all the time whose children have suicidal ideation, who have attempted suicide, who are devastated and or begging for education savings accounts because they need an out and they can't afford it or whatever it is. So when we're talking about those kids and you're describing the children that clearly have poor self-control and other issues, what happened when they were physically violent to another child?
so if a student became what they called triggered or in an emotional high status,
Out of
dependent
control.
out of
Okay.
control in this situation, the majority of the time in my experience it was get on a walkie talkie, call for help.
Okay.
um, if it was really that bad, then I was supposed to take the students that were uninvolved away and leave the classroom. So
With the
I
violent offender.
No, the violent offender would be left there.
Okay.
And I was not to approach, not to engage,
Uh-huh.
not to avert, and
Okay.
not be involved. Just basically take those students that are not involved away.
Okay.
And so there's
Does a
I
Reese
never I never physically had to do this, but I know many other teachers that literally had to take, if they had 27 students, they'd have to take 25 of the students out of the classroom, halt teaching, leave the classroom, line them up out in the hallway, and wait for assistance to go into the classroom to manage the 1 or 2 students that
Like a resource officer or something?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So let's go with, so this occurs or there's an outburst. Learning is disrupted. Okay. Okay. So if that happens, then what happens to the student that is misbehaving and I would say needs strong discipline? What happens?
Most of the time, that's when administration would come in
Uh-huh.
and have a conversation with that student. And I, as a teacher, never witnessed what actually happened. I don't know if parents were involved. I
Okay.
don't know what kind of transparency of the situation was given. I don't know what kind of communication there was.
Mhm.
I know as a teacher, I personally would reach out to families and try to have direct conversations, try to have direct meetings. Whether that took place or not depended on the circumstance. So,
It doesn't sound like a lot of discipline.
no.
Okay. So part of the day is disrupted. I'm going to go with sometimes all of the day is disrupted, but okay. The child may or may not be disciplined. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying? They may
Yes.
or may not.
So
It sounds
the
like there's a de-escalation and then
Yep, it's
here
like,
we are again,
okay,
go back to teaching.
exactly.
Okay.
Let's calm everybody down, talk about the problem, and then move on.
Okay.
Calm everybody down, talk about the problem, and then move on.
Okay. While the
There-
problem is still in the classroom.
Correct. So there was never really any direct consequences to their
Mhm.
action.
Okay.
And there was no accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my circumstance, I had multiple students that would intentionally use very offensive language towards others,
Mhm.
including other staff members.
Okay.
Accusations that were very, very intentional and very harmful accusations that were
Okay.
being thrown around.
Okay.
And absolutely nothing being done about it, to where it was a chronic issue that was never being addressed.
By administration.
Correct.
The administration was not backing up the teachers when they were being
Correct.
called names or, yeah. So I'm saying, because I hear this from a lot of teachers,
Yeah.
this lack of support for teachers.
Yeah.
And there's this constant, opposition to empowering parents, opposition to education reform, is constantly saying, just give us more money. And I'm constantly looking at teachers telling their stories, telling me, telling others their stories. And no teacher goes into teaching to get rich. They go in because they have a calling, right? You talked about your calling. You want to serve kids. Of course, you need to be able to pay your bills and whatnot. But where the majority of teachers are saying they're frustrated and leaving is they don't have the support to discipline, to remove problem children so that they can actually educate the rest of the kids.
Yes. The lack of respect of authority
Mhm.
that children have right now is detrimental to the classroom.
Yeah.
And until teachers have support, the adults have support to be able to manage children in a way that's effective, it's not a safe environment.
Right.
It's not a safe environment for adults to be there.
Right.
And if the adults can't adult the children and they're handcuffed in any and all circumstances,
Yeah.
then it's not a safe, healthy working environment.
You mentioned that children saying things, making accusations. Does that go back to when earlier you talked about racism?
Correct.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about
So,
that experience? Or
yeah,
all of them, whatever.
all of it.
All
Yeah.
right. Let's hear what you're talking about. So, because I bet there are lots of other teachers. I say I bet because I know that I'm going to win that bet. I've heard it. Tell us what happened. I do hear this a lot as it surrounds horrible racist language and the inability to discipline and really stop it in its tracks. And then it just permeates the entire class, the grade, the culture of the classroom. So go ahead. Let's hear the stories.
So I personally have the belief that words have power.
Yep.
And how you speak is a representation of who you want to be. And what I am seeing more and more and more is that there's a lack of self-respect being taught to children. And so these kids are coming out and they're using foul language as early as pre-K and have no understanding of the words they're even using.
Mhm.
Now, fast forward, you've got a fourth or a fifth grader and they're using foul language um, with zero consequence. So they think it's just perfectly okay. It's okay to behave and accuse and be insulting and be disrespectful. And they're not really looking at how it's a reflection of who they are.
Mhm.
So when I was in the classroom, one of the three main things I tried to develop in a healthy classroom was, hey, be aware. Be aware of the words that you use and know that if you want to be respected, then you need to be respectful.
Mhm.
And so I was able to cultivate that for the majority of my year. However, the N word, the F word
Okay.
was a constant verbiage being used in with the students. And the
So sorry to stop you. Okay. So students are using foul language and you're saying it, the N word and the F word. So when you hear it as a teacher, you try and correct them and say, you can't do this. At what point do you try to discipline them, or do you? If you don't, is it because administration stopped you, or what is because
so the
if it doesn't
belief
stop,
right, the belief in the classroom right now is that you want to address the individual and
okay,
be able to have the biggest impact on the individual that is struggling with that behavior. So, the majority of the year, all three of us teachers supported one another by if we hear a specific student use this language, we pull them outside the classroom, have a conversation, have them self reflect. So, self reflection was
what's the
the
rest of the classroom doing?
correct.
I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Like,
Yes,
okay,
I would have
it's a
to
lot.
pause the class and, or be able to get the class independently working
Mhm.
and basically stop teaching the
That's where I'm going.
class.
You stop
Yeah, you
educating
stop
the
educating the
kids.
class, you pull the student aside, and you address the issue. And you hope that that student is self-reflective. And so there's different tools that you use to help guide that individual to self-reflect. But it is, as we know, the power of groups
Mm.
and that peer influence. And so
And
if
the lack of consequences.
absolutely.
Okay. So you couldn't just pull them and be like, you, principal's office, now,
No,
don't come back.
no. It was
Why?
well, because nothing would be done otherwise. And
If you
if
sent them, would they get sent back?
so basically what happens is you didn't send a student out of the classroom unsupervised without walking or talking, communicating with some other adult. And that other adult would come to the classroom and assist you. Well, if that other adult is unavailable because they're assisting other classes, then you're on your own. And that's
This is nonsense.
it's
I,
like it was like and I'll let you even know I didn't even have a walkie in my class because I was a first year teacher.
Mhm.
They gave walkies to teachers that had further education and certification in dealing with behavior management. And I wasn't one of them because I was a new teacher. I was still just, learning the ways. So I personally rarely had any need because I had a good communication with my students and a
Mhm.
good connection with them where I didn't really need to ask for a lot of assistance. Um, but there was an understanding that, "Hey, I'm telling you this out of love because you're worth more. You don't need to use that language."
Yeah.
So the majority of my students didn't use it on a regular basis in my classroom. It was when they were elsewhere in the school, maybe off at specials, maybe at recess, lunch. Again, it was the peer influence.
Okay.
Um, But it was a chronic issue to where other teachers were literally being called racist, literally being accused
They were being
of
called, why were they being called racist?
because they were trying to discipline the child for not using that particular language.
Okay, so let me understand this. I'm going to ask and maybe make an assumption. So we get it all out there. What I hear and what I'm assuming you're saying, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, is a white teacher was called racist if she would try and correct other students from using abhorrent racist terms.
So a white teacher,
Okay.
a Caucasian woman, was trying to discipline these children from using vulgar language to each other. And when she called them up and said, hey, we don't speak that way, it's inappropriate, they blatantly and bluntly called her racist to her face.
Because she was trying to stop it.
Because she, in their opinion, had was anti supportive of their other races. Basically, you don't support us because we're Black or African American.
But it was in her attempt to stop from using. Okay, I'm not going to.
Yes.
Somebody in the classroom, students were using the N-word, and this white teacher tried to stop them.
Right.
And because she tried to stop them, they then called her racist.
Correct. And I'll even take it further.
Okay.
So this leads us to why I chose to leave the classroom.
Okay.
And the reason why I chose to leave was because we had throughout the year been dealing with this issue. And
can I stop you for 1 second? Throughout the year, we've been dealing with this issue. There's been no detentions. No extra work assignments. No in-school suspensions. No out-of-school suspensions. Parent-teacher conferences.
We are told.
Was there any discipline? I'm not talking get down at their level and tell them this is bad. There was nothing.
We were told to document issues, and once they had enough evidence that they could, then they would.
What's enough?
And
is there a number? Is it okay? All right. I just
no clarification.
Want to make sure. Okay,
correct.
Great.
Yeah.
Right.
So at this point, we're needing to take it in our own hands just to be able to keep a healthy environment in the classroom for educational purposes. Yeah. And so fast forward now, we're going into April, close to the end of the school year. Sure. And it just so happened to be teaching a lesson on the use of the English language, specifically how to use prefixes and suffixes. And so we're in the conversation of looking at the origin of the word, understanding its meaning, and then what does a prefix or suffix do to the word meaning, and or how we change the use of the word in a sentence. Okay. Again, just clarity on how the English language is used for communication and how it can be altered depending on how we need to use it. Yeah. And in this full class conversation, there were some examples of words that were brought up. One from a child that used a derogatory manner the word fatherless. And it was very it was an accusation of belittling.
It was bullying.
It was bullying.
Right.
Outright in the class.
Right.
And I called them out on it. And I said, whoa, pause here. So because the word fatherless is not a negative word. It can be a very emotional word. Yeah. If my father passes away, I'm now fatherless. That's not negative. That's emotional. There's emotional intent behind the meaning of the word. So we had a great conversation about it. Okay, fast forward now, the students are to do an assignment, go get a dictionary, look up words, look up prefixes, suffixes, apply and practice what I just taught. And in the transition for them to get their books, I openly hear one student call another student the N-word. And I went, you know what? This right now is a teachable moment. I have tried all year long to address this one-on-one. I have tried doing it with administration. I've worked with other staff members on the same problem. Why not use this as an example?
Okay.
So I pause the class, I bring us back, and I ask them, we just had a conversation about the power of words in the English language and how it can be emotionally triggering or offensive, or just depending on how you use it.
Mhm.
Why do you think people use language that is so offensive? And the students responded beautifully. They knew, oh, they want attention. Oh, they think it's funny. Oh, they want to be hurtful.
Mhm.
All the things that we know
Mhm.
goes with it. And I said, exactly. So why do you think all year long I've been saying, I personally am offended when I hear the F word, the N word in my classroom? It hurts me. And I took it even further and I said, it hurts others in the class. And it's the N word in particular has huge historical meaning.
Right.
We just studied the origin of a word. Have you ever thought to think about what you're saying when you use that word and the history behind it and the power it has? And I said, this is why we just don't use it, period. Plain and simple. It's offensive. And one student particularly asked me, well, why, what is the N word? And I said, well, we all know what the N word is, but
Mhm.
we're not going to use it. And conversation ends. They go off. That happened on a Friday. Come Monday morning, out of nowhere, administration pulls me from my classroom, takes me downstairs, and says we're having a meeting with HR. Why? Because two students from my classroom went home and said that I had called students the N word in the class and that I was a racist. And so she had two parents very upset. And I was like, oh, okay. So we had a conversation about what actually took place in the classroom. But in the end, I was put under a leave of absence. They asked me to leave on the spot, leave the premises. Um, and they put me and all my students pretty much under interrogation.
Just to confirm, this classroom, this grade, these students, you have dealt with this with your cohort of teachers for the entirety of the year. You start school in August, we're at April. You've dealt with it. There's been no serious consequence. Just pull them aside and some
Right. Slap their
gentle
hands.
teaching or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
No, no.
Like I say it because
Mhm.
I laugh at the gentle parenting thing, but that's what it sounds like they're getting. Like,
Mhm.
let's talk to the kids. Okay. So this has gone on throughout the whole school year, and you finally take a firm stand
In a teachable
in a
moment,
teachable moment after
directing them.
another child has said this to another child,
Right.
and students took this as an opportunity to go tell their parents. And if it was true, obviously awful, and parents would rightfully be angry.
Yes.
But the whole context of the situation was you finally trying, because you can't, in school suspension, detention, you can't do anything to actually discipline them. You're trying to
Correct.
stop them, and it was weaponized against you.
Correct. I was falsely accused of
Yep.
being a racist. I was not allowed to communicate at all directly with the parents.
Okay.
I had no opportunity whatsoever to clarify the circumstance with any adults. Administration put me basically said, go home, be silent, we'll manage it.
So nothing on the kids throughout the year, but as soon as
No,
you try and stop it.
correct.
Okay.
And so in the end, they did. They pulled all of my students in individually and asked them what took place in the classroom. And pretty much they're like, okay, this is what she said is true, actually took place in the class. Let's bring her back. So now I'm asked to come back to teach in the classroom. I am sat down with the DEI management of the district and asked to actually work with them to help educate teachers on how to manage going forward such racial issues. And
Time out.
yeah,
Say it again. Suburb of Austin, Texas.
correct.
You are sat down with whom?
with the chief of, at the time, the chief of DEI,
Diversity, equity, inclusion.
and the area superintendent.
Okay.
And the two of them sat down with me and had a conversation about how they're seeing this racial inequality is such an issue in our district, and how can I be, a part of the solution.
How can you be a part of the solution?
Exactly. So I was even willing to go forward and to be like, okay, you know what? They genuinely do want to make change happen in the classroom and to get things better. And so I truly believe that, until that evening, I got a phone call from the principal and said, I'm sorry, after more conversation with these two
The DEI officer.
officer, we've decided not to bring you back. We are going to ask that you not finish the school year. We're going to put you on paid suspension, but we ask you to come back next year.
Wait, what? Huh? Okay. Why did they change their mind? Were you not playing ball or something? Or what was discussed in this DEI meeting?
Because in the DEI meeting, I referenced the actual N-word between me and the two adults. They wanted clarity. They asked for me.
They asked you the question.
Correct.
In your thing.
Correct.
You answered exactly what the kids were saying.
Yes. I was completely transparent.
This is La La Land.
Yes. Okay. It was me and two adults having an adult conversation, having direct clarity, being very upfront.
You.
They asked me.
Okay.
They upfront asked me, when you said N-word, F-word, SH word, whatever words, did you actually, and what was it? And so I said it, and they basically said, well, we don't use that language. We were told not to use that language.
Unless you're a child.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And so here I am trying to use a teachable moment to get to the heart, the root of why foul language shouldn't be used, period.
Right.
But let alone with children. And I was basically asked to leave because
for that year, but they wanted you back.
Correct.
How do they square that away? Why?
So they said because it was for my best interest to protect me from any future possible emotional communication that might take place between me and any of the parents. Mm-hmm. Here's the catch, though. The one girl that brought it to her mother's attention, the mother said she completely understood, got clarity, wanted me back. I know this because she reached out to me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then the other parent chose, once she found out that I was going to be coming back, chose to withdraw her 3 children from the school.
Oh.
So she was no longer even going to be a student of mine. And again, we're to the point, like, this whole situation took place over probably 3.5 weeks time. So now we're talking May, to where we're really just wrapping up.
Yeah.
And I just felt I felt horrible for my co-teachers, because not only did they lose a teacher because she didn't have support, she left because she didn't have classroom management. Now they're down to 2 of us, and now I'm being pulled from the classroom. They're down to one.
Who's teaching the
one
kids?
Teacher. And so what they had to do is literally pull in any kind of special ed teaching, or they were pulling teachers wherever they could.
We could have nipped this in the bud real fast had we gone after it the first time that any child said any sort of inappropriate foul language.
Correct.
Any of them.
Right.
Any of the alphabet words.
But there is such a lack of authority, respect, and just clarity. There was no clear boundaries. It went right back to that. And with love, healthy boundaries with love. And they were still just not.
Sometimes love is enforcing.
Right.
I love my children more than anything in this world. Everything I do is for them. But I also discipline my children.
Right.
As
And
most parents, but as you do, like that's the whole thing.
right.
Love is not sitting there trying to have, I'm sorry, some sort of, oh, we shouldn't use that. Like
It's
sometimes
pulling
you're going
them
to have
up.
a
Yes.
consequence. They
Yes.
learn.
Yes. Because with every choice you make, there's a cost and there's a
That's right.
payoff.
That's right.
And unfortunately, what what breaks my heart, honestly,
Mhm.
is that I never got to go back into that classroom and explain to those children that there is a cost for every choice that you make.
Mhm.
And the cost is so much greater than the payoff. Unfortunately, they see it as they got me fired.
Right. Well, I would go back and like to look at their test scores and say, I mean, that's a lot of time not to have a teacher, not to have consistency, not to have and this goes back to kind of where I hear parents saying it all the time about why they support education savings accounts, school choice is it's not just for the kids that need to leave and go to another school, the children that are being bullied, the children that are not being served in the traditional system. But the school system right now has in far too many places, and we'll get to where that there are good administrators, obviously, but
Yeah.
in far too many places, the administration have abdicated their responsibilities to implement boundaries, discipline, support for teachers in the classroom, and it's chaos and children are not learning. And the purpose of school is for children to get an education so that they
Right.
may launch.
Right. And part of that is the social emotional learning. However, what has been happening in my experience is that there's so much social emotional focus
Right.
with no action being taken place. So you can write out all kinds of rules on paper,
Mhm.
but if you don't follow through with what should take place, if those rules are broken, then nothing's going to be learned.
If kids don't have consequences and boundaries,
Correct.
they don't learn. In
And
fact, they learn the opposite.
right. And there's the focus right there
Yeah.
is that teachers, especially at elementary school level,
Yeah.
because my experience is I've got 3 children, one is still in elementary, 2 are now in junior high.
Mhm.
It's like all of a sudden they go from 5th grade to 6th grade and boom, a switch takes place. And now consequences are very clear, but there's follow through. There's action that actually happens. And so my children's experience is vastly different now in the school that they're at versus to where they were.
Because the school leader has laid out
Correct.
boundaries, expectations, and
Correct.
consequences.
And he's exceptionally involved with communicating. He genuinely wants to hear parents speak up. And that is why I'm here today is I want to advocate for children so that they get what they need and what they deserve for our future. I want to advocate for teachers that don't speak out, don't pause because they're just drowning. They're too
Well, they're
busy
scared too.
and they're
I
scared.
get teachers that
Yes.
they email me, they come up to me, and they tell me the stories that you're saying, but they're afraid
Yeah.
because to a large degree, there's a monopsony, right?
Sure.
There's only so many places you can go to teach at this time, and
Right.
you don't want to lose your job.
Right.
I hear that from teachers all the time.
And
this is what happens. And you said there's great leaders, there's great administrators, like the school that your daughters are at now.
Yes.
But they're growing fewer and further between from what I can tell.
Well, what happens, at least from the multiple, many conversations I've had with teachers over the years, is that teachers are investing into their communities.
Yeah.
They're investing into the children, into the families. That's why when you teach 3rd grade and kids graduate from high school, they go back and they visit their elementary school teachers. And that's the power of teaching that teachers thrive off of and want to do. They want to give.
Yes.
And build up, again, future generations. However, when it's to the point where they're having more and more negative experiences versus positive, it breaks the motivation to teach.
Sure.
And that's what finally made me go, you know what? It's just not a healthy environment right now. It doesn't feel safe for me.
Yeah.
I'm choosing not to go back to the classroom
Yeah.
right now. But that's unfortunately what is happening.
All across.
I'll tell you, the the after my experience of being pulled from the classroom and choosing not to go back, out of 47 staff members, 39 of them resigned that year.
Oh my goodness. Holy
So the
cow.
number of teachers leaving is beyond the normal, you know, professional transitions that take place in the profession.
Did the administrator leave?
The administrator did not leave.
Did the DEI officer leave?
No, unfortunately.
Are they still there? Do
They
you know?
are still there.
Are they called DEI?
They are not called DEI.
What's their title now?
However, they do have, still a DEI, I guess, what is it? Committee. They have a DEI committee that they still support, even though titles have been changed.
Right. We're seeing that a lot.
Yeah. And I understand we do want diversity. We do want people to have opportunity and equality. We want that. We want people to speak up and have choice and have their own empowerment. That is for everyone. We need that. It's the approach in which it's, well, do it our way.
Right.
Or
It's
not at all.
diverse. Right. It's a euphemism for
It's
bend a
hypocrisy.
knee
Yeah, it's
to
hypocrisy
social
big time.
justice
Correct.
that we believe should be implemented. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, whew.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was your experience teaching. And I wish I could say that I haven't heard these stories before. You're just one of the ones that are courageous enough to come and share them and talk about them. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to shift gears a little bit to now from teacher mode to mom mode. Simultaneously, while you were dealing with the struggles, the lack of support in trying to educate these children without the ability to discipline, one of your daughters had a pretty tough experience. And what we're seeing, what I would call the hypersexualization, particularly of our elementary school kids. Kids from as early as kindergarten, from what I'm being told, are being asked their pronouns and preferred names. I've got lots of parents that have talked about whether it's their children or friends of their children that have been encouraged to transition or being called by a different name and all of this stuff. I've got parents that are telling me that now no longer just being, a girl interested in a boy, that's not really cool or acceptable, that you can't be heterosexual. Now you need to be bisexual. That's a very common thing. But this hypersexualization that's going on, can you talk to us a little bit about the personal experience that you witnessed as a teacher and this hypersexualization, but also that your family experienced, unfortunately?
Yeah. So, where do I begin on that one? Again, just advocating for the safety of children in the school environment. And one of the biggest things that I'm seeing is there are pros and there are cons to using technology in the classroom. The biggest con that I have is that there's not enough safety protections around it. And even though there are programs specifically designed for the classroom for teachers to be able to monitor the usage of computer, it's not currently, or wasn't currently, being used when I was in the classroom. I am praying that other districts implement such programs to really, really do a hard look at the access students have when they're on a computer. And I say this because my daughter, while in 4th grade, was exposed to very difficult pornographic images while in the classroom on a school computer.
By a peer.
So she had befriended another child in the classroom, and were often partnered with her for individual work to be done, specifically for math. So their assignments were to get on a math program to practice skills and to be a partner to help each other. My daughter was basically helping teach this other child. And what we found was every time that she was put on an assignment, this girl would actually pull up very inappropriate images and show them to my daughter.
Pornography. She would pull up
Yes,
pornographic images
yes.
on the school
School
issued
computer.
computer. Okay.
Yes. And then it escalated because a group of boys saw her watching these things, and it became an inside classroom thing to do. So now you've got multiple children accessing, well, how did you do that? What was the site? And so now a handful of students are pulling it up. And then in addition to that, even though we say no personal cell phones are allowed on campus, they are to be shut down, turned off during school hours. This child also had her personal cell phone and was taking it out to the recess and turning it on and showing even worse pornographic images than what was being allowed access to on the school computer. So my daughter pretty much was, from the beginning of the school year to, I would say, January, basically in a position where she didn't know how to handle a peer showing her things that she emotionally couldn't process.
Did you notice a change in your daughter?
We did, and I had been addressing it. I thought it was, she had explained that she didn't have a lot of girl friends in her particular class that she got along with because uh, the girls in her class chose to bully the girl that she befriended. And
that was showing the pornography.
Correct. And so she was trying to be a friend with this girl that was being bullied from the other girls in the class.
Likely being sexually abused, right? How would you?
Yes.
I just go back to this. I'm sorry. I look at this.
Yes.
And you learn this from somewhere.
Correct.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
So there was an issue.
Yeah.
And your daughter, trying to be kind, recognized something was probably off with this girl.
Yeah. Yes.
And then became friends and then was exposed to this.
Right.
Okay.
And so we have a child that has a very unhealthy home life.
Right.
And it's showing up in the classroom.
Right.
And she's getting mistreated from her peers. And so now you've got my daughter trying to, be compassionate and be her friend. And in doing so, was exposed to things that were very, very harmful. So yes, our daughter, basically how we came to light was in the classroom, the boys that were involved with this group that were now antagonizing, asking for gestures, inappropriate behaviors, more bullying, going back to that, and foul language, going back to that. They basically made a practical joke that the teacher caught.
Okay.
And the teacher said, "What's this about?" And my daughter broke down and started crying, and she hit her breaking point. And so she told her teacher, and the teacher sent her and those students down to the principal's office. And what happened was she was interrogated individually, and she wrote out a written confession of the whole situation that had taken place throughout the year. So now I'm in the classroom teaching. I get pulled as a parent and asked to switch gears and just, you're here as a mom. I would need you to read your daughter's confession. And I was sickened by what I saw written from my daughter's own handwriting. It was atrocious. And so I was like, okay, as a professional, I understand children come from all kinds of homes and backgrounds. That's one of the things that we try to advocate for, is a healthy environment, a safe place for kids to come to at school, which may not be the same at home. However,
it's your child.
It's my child. And so now we are requesting that she be removed from that classroom, have no kind of contact with this other child or the group of boys, to stop the bullying. And so they did. The administration supported us on moving her. They did advocate to the other parents and let them know, hey, this is the communication and this is what's happening, and your daughter is part of it. And so the parent did choose to pull her daughter for the remaining of the year
The child that
because
started this?
correct. And
Was
so
there an investigation by CPS or anyone
I don't know
into?
the details of that.
Okay.
Even as a teacher, I wouldn't know the details of
Sure,
that.
okay.
That's where admin really has to step in. And so there was a huge support within the circumstance. I feel like the school really did do the best they could,
Okay.
knowing that they're dealing with an unhealthy situation. And, so I feel like they really did do the best they could.
Mhm.
Was the damage there? Yes.
I was gonna say, you can't erase that.
Correct.
Once
Yes.
children are exposed to this, and
Right.
that's really part of a lot of the problems that we hear. I
Right.
know, there was the little girl from Plainview, the kindergartner, who was exposed and then engaged in sexual activity on I mean, like,
Yes.
this happens at people. It's one of the very reasons why I send my
Right.
children to a school without technology.
Well,
It's
they've done the science and the research supports that the emotional processing of a child for harmful imagery is real and
Yeah.
it is long-term effects. So one of the things I did advise is that we put her in therapy. Well, we are a very strong family, faith-based family,
Yeah.
and we were able to have lots of very difficult conversations, but we had open dialogue. And I feel like that's the thing that needs to take place is
Yeah.
just, hey, recognize that the world we live in is messy and yucky, and not everything you see or hear is true. And that's the challenge of social media for kids. It's a huge problem for adults, if you ask me, but it's also detrimental to kids'
Yeah.
growth and maturity.
Yeah. Well, I commend you for keeping your composure. Um,
I think it
I
was
don't
more
know
like shock.
if I would have been that strong.
Yeah, it was more shock than
Yeah, no,
composure, but yes, yes, it
that
was
is.
tough.
I I appreciate you sharing this incredibly emotional situation. I think it's important because, again, this is not new. It's
No.
happening
Mm-mm.
everywhere.
Mm-mm.
I am told by parent after parent after parent that their child has been exposed to really inappropriate things. And to some extent, you're in this position of, okay, well, if a child is doing that, they're a victim. Wherever it started, what happened where these children are exposed to the stuff that they know how to access it, that they're passing it. And um, it's just, it's a huge, huge problem that really has permeated far too many schools. And I get that it puts the administrations in hard situations.
Very hard. And
I do go back to there has to be some sort of consequences. And I would advocate for, while I understand there are some technology that proves to be successful, that children in elementary school should not be on technology. They should not be handed devices. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I feel blessed to have the opportunity to put my children in a school that they don't.
Right. Well, it's addressing root causes of issues,
Mhm.
and the reality of it is there's some things that we have learned from old school learning that are more purposeful than any new thing that
Oh,
we can come
yes.
up with.
The majority of it. When you look at this introduction of technology, which is a
Yeah.
whole other discussion, but we can already see that since the introduction of the iPhone on the market,
Mhm.
which would be in most kids' hands, but I think it's a 65 jump in the prefrontal cortex,
Mhm.
prefrontal lobe, which is what regulates emotions and all, and ADD and ADHD and these emotional regulatory systems in these kids' heads, and you're just messing with it.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, you know, you can't regulate your child's every move.
Right.
What we are responsible for is giving them the tools to be able to make those choices to regulate themselves. And that's the biggest thing I'm seeing a lack of.
Yeah.
And so I really want to see parents be aware of all of the different influences to their child
Yeah.
because they know their child best. And that's the thing I keep going back to is the reality of it is I trust my children to go to school. I trust them to go to church. I trust them to go to their sports, their whatever. And I'm entrusting them in the adults that run those programs. But the reality of it is I still need to be aware of what they're being exposed to
Right.
because I'm going to have the biggest influence on them.
Yeah.
And you know, technology is something that you can't regulate enough because now you're dealing with a monster that's bigger than
Yeah.
your teachers or your
Well, and that's why I would say the parent empowerment movement, you know, it's not the school choice movement for a reason. It is the parent empowerment movement, which includes parents that select public schools, public charter schools. Parents should be making the decisions of the environment their children are in. And quite frankly, that's why it's so important is because if you send your child to a public school, if that's your choice, that's wonderful. You should also have the ability to say to the school,
right.
we're not going to do this. We're not going to allow the N word. We're not going to put technology in kindergartners' hands. We're not going to do that. Or I am going to leave.
Right.
Or I am making a different choice. And I have the ability to do that. And that is really where we have seen in other states private school choice be a rising tide that did improve the public school systems because the technology thing just drives me crazy. Because it's just a bunch of lobbyists that get paid millions of dollars. I mean, you can go check all this. And they go in and they advocate and they make it sound like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they have no concern for the developing brain.
Long-term
and
effects.
the long-term effects on the next generation of Texas. It's about, I'm paid to go do this by this massive corporation. Because let me tell you, these Mac, Dell, all these entities, they aren't putting these these technology pieces, whether it's iPad or computers or whatever, they're not putting them in the classrooms for altruistic reasons.
It's business.
It's business. It's big money.
Right.
It's big money. I would much rather see the money go into teachers' pockets.
Right. Well, the reality of it is we need balance. And I see an educational swing. Even politically, we see swings. Boom, boom. I mean, look at this last election. What I would love to see is somewhere down the middle. Let's get balanced. So technology isn't horrible if it's used appropriate and educated to be a tool and not a toy.
Right.
And right now it's like, again, it's the swing of being used too much.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you are, humans are made to be in community. We're made to socially connect. That is just a huge purpose of why we're here. What happens is people have numbed themselves and disconnected in so many different ways. They've stopped being involved. They don't think that their voice can make a change. They don't think taking action will show positive results. And so they've stopped trying. And I am here to say, hey, don't stop. Your kids matter more. Get involved. If your kids go to a school, you are part of that community, whether you want to be or not. So take that pause, take that moment to get involved, whether it be just even having a conversation with your teacher. That was huge. I had such a hard time getting parents to come in even to meet with me or talk with me. And I think that would have made a huge difference under the circumstances I went through. So,
well, that's a perfect segue into wrapping up. You already said it to the parents, but I would love for you to look in that camera right there and talk to the parents, to the patriots, even to the teachers of Texas, and tell them why they should be involved in the parent empowerment movement to improve the education system for every child.
Absolutely. So I never thought I would be involved with anything political. I was always one of those that wanted to care for others, help others, do good. But now I see that part of doing good and doing right is being involved. And the parent empowerment movement is how you can be involved with something that truly matters. You, your families, your children, our future. And we are so blessed to have this opportunity to say what we need to say and to be aware, because change won't happen if awareness isn't there. So, please get involved. It's important.
Thank you, Julie, for joining us and
Thank you.
sharing your experience and talking from the heart. I know we covered some really heavy topics, but it's important to parents to really hear that they're not alone in this. Thank you for joining us today on Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogan. And now you have the power.